My name is Farhaan Ladhani, and I'm the co-founder of a company called Goodbit. So when you go online, you read something, you want to have a conversation about that thing, and you decide not to. Sometimes because it's confusing, often because you might disagree with it, but you're not really comfortable with what happens next. You might feel isolated. You don't feel like the conversation represents you. You don't feel like being mad or angry about it. Well, we're solving that problem for the 90% of people who choose not to engage by creating a space for them to have better conversations. So you start by reading a story. And that story is going to learn a little bit about you. It's going to challenge you to learn a little bit about the topic. And in learning about the topic, you might find out things that you understand, that you don't, that you agree with, or that you disagree with. And in the process of that learning, you're shaping a perspective on whatever that topic happens to be. So you understand yourself a little better. And you also understand what a community thinks about that topic, the many ways that they might consider that topic, the way they might try to understand it, the questions that they have, the conceptions or misconceptions that they might have. And through the process of learning about yourself and the community, you're just better equipped to have a conversation about that topic, no matter what it is. I'll give you an example from about 5 years ago, because people will remember. It was the pandemic. All sorts of information was flying around about COVID-19 and the vaccine. People were confronted by all sorts of conversations, lots of rumors, mostly fear about where COVID came from, what caused it, how do you get it, what do you do about it? And in that cacophony of conversation, figuring out what was accurate or inaccurate got harder and harder. And it turns out that for many people, how you sorted out whether you believe something or don't had less and less to do with facts and more to do with what you trusted, who you trusted, and why you trusted it. So during that pandemic, we learned that we could actually engage people in a more meaningful conversation by giving them an opportunity to learn about a subject, learn about where COVID came from, what was causing it, how you could protect yourself, and how you might have a conversation with somebody else about that topic. And that taught us a lot about how having a conversation, the how of the conversation, has a really big impact on the way in which you choose to behave after you learn about something. And that sounds really obvious, which is why we have all sorts of people who mean really well, governments, health organizations, associations, doctors, professionals, that will try to tell you the right information, that try to give you the right fact because they mean really well. They want you to understand it. But how that information is delivered, we learned, has an incredible effect on people's choices after they're confronted with something that might contradict what they believed before they encountered it. And the best social science research tells us about the way in which people will often reject information that doesn't fit with their identity, because people have attached those two things so much closer together. So how do we create a space where you can play with ideas a little bit more safely, where you don't feel like another person is confronting you or challenging you in a way that makes you feel dumb, that makes you feel small, or that makes you feel like they're attacking you as a person? How do you create a space for people to play with those ideas and challenge what they believe? So we create an environment, looks like a game, feels like a game, isn't a game, where people can confront some of those concepts in ways that are really productive. And then when you get two people who've gone through that experience, all sorts of magic happens. You get a wonderful conversation that was harder to unlock before they engaged, because they spent so much time trying to figure out whose position was what, that they couldn't actually get to the meat of the subject. And we found a way around that. So the government of Canada's used us in a couple of different ways as a government. So for example, they've used us to help address workplace violence and harassment. So that's across the country, across institutions. We've had organizations, neighborhood organizations, who've used our tools to be able to engage citizens in a conversation about development in their community. So all the way from the big, across the country, down to the very small, the really refined neighborhood. Turns out that some of the conversation patterns are really quite similar, in that the way that people actually engage in those conversations, how they navigate around the roadblocks that they might have, again, because the conversation might be complex, it might not be consistent with their prior opinions, views, or beliefs, or that they're really not very comfortable having that conversation because they feel that they're going to be rejected. We've found ways to help navigate around those kinds of roadblocks, whether you're having a national conversation or a very, very local one. And what we've learned is that the people who are provoking the conversation, the hosts of the conversation, the institutions, learn an incredible amount about the community that they never really understood. At the neighborhood level, why was it that people that are often considered marginalized or that don't often have a voice show up and tell you more about what they think through what we're doing than showing up in a meeting at 9:00 at night? How do we unlock the views and perspectives that they might have that might contribute to a better community that is just not accessible in a town hall format? Or if you're talking about a massive national campaign, how do you understand the clusters of opinion that might exist on the workplace that really gets at the heart of why people choose to behave in the way that they do or don't act when they're confronted by the kinds of things that happen in a workplace that they might be uncomfortable with? What is the impediment and how do we get around that? So we can unlock that understanding for each of those institutions. Goodbit and Canada are inextricably linked with one another. As a kid from an immigrant family that came to this country with, the same story that most do, 2 pennies in their pocket, and were given an immense opportunity and frankly privilege to be able to learn, to be able to grow, and then afford the opportunities that I have, both to improve my professional life as well as my experiences around the world, are deeply actually ingrained in the ethos of the company, Goodbit, for good or for bad. What do I mean by that? When you live in a society as diverse and pluralistic as this one, what you come to realize over time is that oftentimes there's some fragility in that, because what you're trying to do is help people align around shared concepts, shared beliefs, and shared approaches to improving the quality of their lives. How you do that is really, really important. And it's going to make the difference between actually seeing that improvement or observing the opposite, which is the tearing of that social fabric. And growing up in a society like this, where you see all around you the benefits that accrue from that diversity, you want to hold on to it. And I think that's foundational in the way that Goodbit today exists and is designed, and why Canada is amongst the only places that perhaps could have given birth to it. And so we hold that pretty dear. I think there's an immense opportunity for Canada. As Canada thinks a little bit about its future, particularly today, at a moment we're reconsidering what it means to be part of the Confederation, what it means to be a city or a province in this great country, Canada, and how we make decisions and choices as individual people, as communities, and as a society. The how of that choice making could be an immense value both to this country and to everybody else who are confronted, if not today, in the not too distant future, with similar types of challenges. So I think we've got an incredible learning opportunity in this country. I think we've got an incredible learning opportunity that just about everywhere in the world can benefit from. And as a result, I think baking Goodbit here in Canada is part of our strategic advantage. And I'd finally say that the way in which we benefit from that strategic advantage is by making sure that we're making it accessible to just about everyone else in the world as we learn. I've had the benefit of working in dozens of countries around the world. Some of the foundational elements of what is Goodbit today were methods and approaches that we had the privilege of learning from in more than 20 places around the world. Very distinct countries, very distinct places where the local conditions we're really quite unique. There are some really big differences, really significant ones that you have to consider when engaging in just about any place in the world. And then there's some common humanity. There's some real commonality in the expectations that people have, in the challenges they have when they're confronting new information, when they are navigating around their own inherent bias, and when you want to increase their receptivity to perspectives that go beyond their own. And that commonality is a massive strategic advantage. It actually means that you can learn things from multiple places at once that allow you to stack up to an approach that can be more universal. And I think that contemporary social platforms, the legacy social media around us, has actually taught us that pretty well. That some of the same things that make them really effective from place to place to place are actually tying back to some of the foundational behavioral characteristics we have, for good and for bad. And so I think the promise of the universality of the human condition in some respects is actually a massive strategic advantage. But we start by thinking locally and thinking about those local conditions, regardless of whether you're on the other side of the world or from one neighborhood to the next here. I believe in proximate communities. What do I mean by that? I think people's relationship to their neighborhoods and to their immediate surroundings is immense. And I think that that desire to stay connected to the place you're in is a foundational part of how we foster deep engagement, because they're the kinds of interactions that you're going to encounter every single day, from your neighborhood that you walk around in, to the school you take your kids to the shops that you visit and the restaurants that you frequent. All of those tie you back to this place that is an important part of your life. And so we start with that locus and then grow from there. You know, one of the things that I think is pretty amazing about this country is we're still really young. And that means that we can build. It means that communities have the ability to shape their environment in ways that are, I think, more significant than you would in places that are far more established. We have opportunities for infrastructure development that are harder to deliver in other localities because we're still relatively young. The way we choose to organize ourselves, the way in which we might co-locate communities and businesses and government together, there's all sorts of scope for reimagining what these communities look like. And I think that's actually a strategic advantage, because it's not required that we have to fight back against some established norm in order to create a new paradigm. It's actually greenfield. There's all sorts of greenfield opportunity in this country. I don't know that that's particularly unique only to Canada, but I would imagine that Canada is one of the places where that greenfield opportunity is pretty significant. And if we can tap into the entrepreneurial spirit of a young country with the ability to shape its surroundings and the way in which we want those surroundings to come together in a complete community, learning from the best in the world and applying it to our local circumstance, that sounds like a pretty wonderful thing. So I think Tech for Canada creates a wonderful opportunity for collision. What do I mean by that? It brings people together from across the city. Some of these people know each other, some of them don't. But the opportunity to actually have a conversation face to face in a room, to tackle a couple of problems, to share best practice, to share some of the lessons learned, to me, that's the foundation of community. And out of community, incredible things happen. The ability to identify shared interest, the ability to identify opportunities for collaboration, the ability to say, we might actually tackle some tough challenges together just as a result of a 2-minute conversation we had. I suspect that all of us have had that experience in rooms. Well, if you can purposefully bring those rooms together, if you can curate the group of people who are going to be in them, and you can fuel them with opportunity, I suspect they're going to capitalize on it. And Tech for Canada, for me, is a wonderful opportunity to find those people, put them in a room, give them some fuel, and create the conditions for them to determine their success. And I've been to events like these all around the world, and it never ceases to amaze me the unexpected collaborations that come from being in a room together to thinking about a problem together and then establishing a way to work together.